In this video, we're going to talk about common mistakes that keep your Facebook and Instagram ads from performing. According to Weebly, 62% of small businesses that tried Facebook ads complained that they didn't perform well enough for them. The good news is, a lot of this can be traced back to very common mistakes that we see people do all the time. And in this video, we're going to cover those mistakes and what you need to change. The first mistake that we see a lot is that people are lacking clear objectives. So before even starting a Facebook or Instagram ad campaign, you need to ask yourselves which objectives are you actually trying to achieve. That's why it's so important to select objectives that you can actually measure. If you have objectives that you can measure, then it's far easier to actually track your performance and make sure that you're on track with your strategy. You really need to understand what are the different steps and processes in the customer journey that you're trying to achieve and that you're trying to boost using paid ads. So how do you actually develop realistic goals? First of all, discuss this with your team and stakeholders. It is very important to have the input of several people to really understand what those people in the teams need to work and need to measure performance. Second, you need to create an action plan. You need to know on which dates you want to execute which campaigns for which reason. So when you actually come up with the objectives, you should make a follow-up and create a very specific action plan of when you're going to execute which actions. And the last advice here is that you should define your key performance indicators. So which are the key indicators that you are going to use to measure performance and to therefore evaluate if you're actually achieving your results or if you need to refine your strategy furthermore. Another common mistake is poor targeting. Facebook and Instagram ad performance heavily relies on the targeting. Before even thinking about ads, you should think of who am I actually trying to reach and how can I reach these people. So take advantage of the targeting, get familiar with it and test different audiences. This is very important. Don't just go for one audience, but if you have the budget to do it, try different audiences, try playing around with the keywords. So don't forget, no matter how good your content is, no matter how good your ad is, if you show it to the wrong people, it will fail and it will not perform. So make sure to create ads and content for specific people and make sure that this content reaches those people. Really play around with the different possibilities you have. You can target by location, by demographics, by interest and so on. So to give you a basic example, if you have to choose which countries to advertise your product in, maybe you want to choose countries that you know have a developed industry and a developed interest for the product that you're selling. That is very important and this can actually help you reduce the costs rather than targeting on a huge scale and trying to include everyone in your targeting. One mistake we also see a lot is people having audiences that are either too wide or too narrow. So as a general advice, I would say every audience should be between 500,000 and 1 million people that the algorithm has enough data to actually scrape through and show your people and test what is working and what is not working. So avoid audiences above 1 million and try to only work with audiences that have a minimum of 500,000 people in them. If you already have a list of customers that have converted on your website, you can actually create a lookalike audience to find similar people on Facebook to those that have made a purchase with you in the past. First, you obviously need to have a solid conversion base, but if you find yourself in that situation, this can actually be a very, very interesting and valuable piece of information for you. The next common problem is that we see a lot of people using the wrong Facebook ads formats. There are different formats for Facebook ads and each of them has their advantages and disadvantages. Your job is to basically test them out and find out what is working for you and what is not working for you. There is no need to actually make the same mistake over and over again and constantly choose campaign types that underperform. For example, as a company, you have the possibility to run conversion ads. If your product is relatively expensive and therefore high risk for your customer, they might not make a 500 or 1,000 euro purchase on your website because they saw an ad. As an alternative, you could try and run lead campaigns and find people that are interested in the topic and get to talk to them and make the conversion happen during a sales call or during a conversation, however you want to communicate with your client, but that can be a completely different approach and the cost per lead is definitely going to be less expensive than the cost per conversion, but a lead alone is worth nothing. If you don't follow up, nothing's going to happen. you should actually consider testing specific ads for specific objectives. Desktop ads, for example, tend to have way higher conversion rates than mobile ads, because if you're sitting on a desktop computer, we could take like 5 minutes to read through a website and try to understand what somebody is actually offering to you. Mobile, on the other hand, you have a lot cheaper results, but obviously somebody that's on the move, on the bus, on the subway is not going to make a 500 or 1,000 euros purchase just because they saw an ad. So you need to be very aware of the customer journey, customer behavior, and the more high risk for the customer, because if you have an expensive product and your product sucks, they run the risk of losing 500 euros for a product they don't like. That's why we say high risk. So if you have a high risk product like this, there needs to be a longer funnel that actually creates the trust and that shows people that your product actually can bring value to them. For high risk and more expensive products, you need to have a clear funnel in mind. Don't use ads only for your sales funnel. You have a lot of possibilities with Facebook ads. You can do way more than just run conversion ads. For example, in our Why You Should Use Facebook Ads video, we actually explained in detail how the organic reach of Facebook is constantly declining and how ads are actually the only way of reaching your audience. So long story short, only 1 to 5% tops of your followers will see your content. To reach all the rest, you will have to use paid ads. The way you would do that is you create a remarketing audience and you boost your posts to this remarketing audience. This doesn't necessarily need to be a conversion ad. This can be a click ad to your blog post. You just want to make sure that all your followers are actually aware that you have a new blog post out. And this is the way you should start thinking of things. How can you nurture your community, and how can you make sure that your content reaches them when the algorithm is blocking organic reach? That's where ads come in. Another thing you can do is you can, for example, create a remarketing audience and run a page-like campaign to them to make sure a lot of people that are actually already consuming your content are going to follow you on Facebook, and like this you can grow and nurture this community. Another common practice for ads or post boosts, for example, is to first run an engagement campaign on Facebook to your remarketing audience so that the people that already know you start to like your piece of content and to put comments under it, and only once it has warmed up, you would actually start the conversion ads when you already have some social proof going on your piece of content. Because how trustworthy is an ad with 0 likes and 0 comments, right? One of the hardest mistakes to avoid is the following one. It is to very clearly present your value proposition. This is very hard because you know your products in and out, and that often gives us this bias of not being able to understand that somebody that has never heard of us is not going to understand our value proposition when they see our ad, unless we design the ad to do so. A lot of times a simple question like "why should I care" can already destroy an entire campaign. You need to be able to answer this with your visuals. Why should somebody that has never heard of you even give you a second of attention when they're actually used to people trying to sell them stuff on social media all the time? That is why it is especially important to make your value clear from second one. For example, all the big players do a great job at this. I'm going to walk you through an example of Airbnb where you can actually see the different ad variations, and all of them make it very clear what this is about. This is very clear that you can get the Airbnb app to find your next great stay. They managed to say everything that needs to be said in the first sentence, and that actually creates a context for people to understand right away what they're being offered here. So how do you make sure that you have a good value proposition? First, your value proposition should be visible and easily understandable in your visual. Don't overcomplicate it. Make the value proposition the main star of your ad. Secondly, you need to communicate the benefits of your product and what differentiates it from alternative or similar products. You should also avoid filling your value proposition with buzzwords and overcomplicating it. Just keep it simple. Make it so that the person can understand what you're selling by looking at your sentence for only a second. The last common mistake is that marketers try to run too complex ad campaigns on a very tight budget. Not only does having an overly complex Facebook ad campaign make it so much harder to manage, but furthermore, it actually decreases performance if you don't know what you're doing. Let's take the example of a conversion ad, for example. According to Facebook, for a conversion ad to perform as well as possible, you would have to generate 50 to 100 conversions per week, per ad set. To achieve that, the Facebook algorithm needs at least 50 to 100 conversions per week per ad set. Now, if you're split testing 5 different ad sets that each have 5 different visuals, then you can calculate that you will need a lot of budget to actually go through with this. So if you have a small budget, Then maybe try testing 1 or 2 ad sets and 1 of 2 ad variations. Don't overcomplicate things and actually do the math to see if what you're trying to do is actually worth it. If your average price per conversion is 50 euros, then split testing 5 ad sets and 10 different ads obviously doesn't make sense unless you can really afford to do so. Try to keep it simple. It's easy to get distracted with all the growth hacks and secret strategies, etc. out there when it comes to Facebook and Instagram ads. You should grow at your own pace and not start to overcomplicate things.